Welcome to another live episode of Marketplace Masters, brought to you by Merchant Spring, the leading marketplace analytics platform for Amazon agencies and vendors. Marketplace Masters is all about going deeper into the challenges that brands and agencies face to lift performance via practical actions and insights. I'm your host, Paul Sonneveld, and today we are talking about what you can do as an agency or as an aggregator to help your clients and brands stay in stock during peak trading season. Now, to help us do this, I've invited Chelsea Cohen to join us and share her expertise. Chelsea is an Amazon inventory management expert and the co-founder and CEO of Stockouts, an Amazon inventory management software. She's also an Amazon seller, speaker, consultant, and her regular clients include 7- and 8-figure sellers. She's been featured on AM/PM podcasts, the 7-Figure Seller Summit, seller events, the Prosper Show, among others. So brings with her a broad range of experience to the conversation today. Thank you so much for being on the show, Chelsea.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
It's I know you've just moved house, and I really appreciate you making the time for us. As you know, we are in the middle of, I call it peak season, Q4, where everything sort of happens. But before we talk about, what sellers and brands can do this year, I just want to take a look back at last year and get your thoughts on Q4 2021. What did you see from an inventory management point of view, and particularly some of the pitfalls you experienced?
Sure. Last year we obviously had restock limits that everyone was, starting to get used to the idea of restock limits. Of course, they went away at the beginning of this last quarter, but we had a lot of restrictions, a lot of logistics issues. We had things like striking. There was a lot of strikes going on. There was a lot of turnover in the warehouses, and that turnover led to a lot of slows in terms of check-in times for Amazon. And we'll talk about it a little bit more in terms of logistics and how to get your inventory checked in faster. But one of the things that caused a lot of these slows in terms of, you get something delivered, but then you wait 5-6 weeks for it to be checked in. That tended to happen a lot, and happen for specific reasons that can be avoided. That's stuff that I would try to mitigate against, which we can talk about. But we did see that because of strikes and because of the massive amount of turnover that Amazon had with their warehousing staff. So that added a lot to the additional strain. Besides restock limits, the check-in times were just horrible. A lot of port closures, a lot of slows at the port, and that type of thing. That was kind of the climate for 2021.
Yeah, that's it brings back a lot of memories just you talking about it. I think we've all forgotten what a challenge last year was, and I'm sure this year Q4 is not without challenges. So you've mentioned a couple of things that we're going to talk about today. Restock limits, check-in times, and we'll cover some other things as well. But let's start with the limits. Being able to have a larger restock limit is obviously critical. It provides the oxygen to your sales. So let's start there. What do you see some of the really good sellers and brands do when it comes to restock limits?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things, and you kind of have to prepare in advance, which we're getting kind of down to the wire. I mean, we're still about a month out from Black Friday. The restock limits are based on your sell-through rate over the last 90 days. So as you increase your sales, your restock limits should be going up. So the focus right now would be on let's increase our sales, let's increase our sell-through, and what that means sometimes is smaller orders more frequently, because Amazon's number one metric that they use for inventory is sell-through. And that basically means how quickly do you turn over inventory? When you send in inventory, how soon do you get it to be sold? And they actually have the calculation available, and it looks at your 90 days of sales versus how much inventory you held on average in the FBA warehouse for that 90-day period. So that is what they consider sell-through. So if you look at your 90-day sales, that is going to dictate your future restock levels. Smaller orders more frequently would be something to focus on. Some of the ways that you can also bolster this, increasing your sales is something that you'll want to do. You can do this by using multi-channel fulfillment. And Amazon last year helped to increase people's restock limits based on the fact that they were using multi-channel fulfillment. They actually were almost bribing people. We haven't heard it in the past or in this last quarter to be something that's happening. But last year, they were sometimes doubling people's restock limits based on the fact that they had connected their Shopify accounts. My opinion is that they want Shopify's information, and they're making a lot of strides in that direction. And so finding, plugging in your multi-channel fulfillment, your Shopify, your eBay, whatever it is, could help to increase your restock limits. And then having that backup of fulfilled by merchant, what that will do is any sales that come through by fulfilled by merchant will add to the top of that, the sell-through rate, that 90-day sales. It will be counted as part of the 90-day sales, but it won't be counted as stock that you're holding at Amazon. So it kind of tips the scale to increase sell-through rate by adjusting kind of that average, just the way the math works out. So those are some of the things that should be thought of when you're looking at restock limits.
That's really interesting. So if you're selling across multiple channels, actually, you can use the fulfillment of your other channels as a way of boosting your limits, mm-hmm. and then you can manipulate the maths equation, right, when it comes to sell-through rate. That is so interesting. So you're boosted the numerator and keep the denominator the same. That's how maths work, right? That is very interesting, Elsie.
Yeah, it's it's interesting we do a news. Every week we write news. We either report or write up some news, and we've been doing a lot of reporting on Amazon and Shopify, and Amazon has been making a lot of moves against Shopify, and Shopify is kind of coming back, but some of them have to do with warehousing and with the data that they want to get from Shopify. So I honestly thought that restock limits were going to be gone for good. At the beginning of the year, first 2 quarters, I was saying to everybody, I think that you guys got to be careful. They can bring it back at any time. And then at a certain point, when they reported, when they launched Buy with Prime basically said non-Amazon sellers can use FBA and we'll fulfill even if you don't sell on Amazon. Mm-hmm. And further, they reported the first down quarter since 2015. They reported a $3.8 billion loss, and most of that was based on the warehousing expansion. So I thought, they're not going to bring back restock limits because they have so much space that they're giving it away to non-Amazon sellers. Of course, then restock limits came back, and I have I have a theory as to why that is, but
sure.
We can obviously get into that.
Oh, very interesting. What else should brands and agencies think about when it comes to restock limits?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, let's jump into things that hurt your restock limits. Stockouts obviously will hurt your restock limits. Excess inventory hurts your restock limits. All of these factor into that sell-through equation. A lot of this is directly affects your inventory performance index score. But if you look at every single one of those points on the IPI score, they all have something to do with sell-through. So we kind of boil it down to, if you just focus on improving your sell-through, increasing your number of sales while you're decreasing the amount of inventory you're holding, at Amazon, that's going to help your restock limits. So stockouts obviously decrease that top number, that number of total sales. Excess inventory increases the bottom number, which you don't want. You want to decrease the bottom number while increasing the top number. And then stale shipments, same type of thing. If you've got stale shipments, those are being counted against you. So if you've got shipments in working status that you're not actually going to be sending, that is counting against your inventory. It's being counted as inventory because Amazon thinks that you're going to send it. So you want to delete those. And then slow sellers are another thing. Look at how can you move your slow sellers so that they're not a drag on your restock limits.
Yeah. Your very interesting point about the stale shipments. I mean, because that's just being disciplined about the paperwork, right? And just making sure that you run a really tight shipment operation. It's certainly, I think that's one certainly easily missed. You've mentioned this calculation actually a few times now. It might be, I think you may have a slide on this anyway, but it'd be great. Would you mind just for us that are sort of mathematically inclined, if you could bring up that, I think it's the sell-through calculation. Always really interesting to see, how does Amazon think about this, right?
Yeah, let me go ahead and throw it up because I had to jump into a different.
Oh, there it is. Perfect.
Yeah. So this is the calculation. Units sold or shipped within the last 90 days, divided by the average units available. Whoops. So that equals your sell-through. So if you have 9,000 units that you sold and you were holding 3,000 units on average, you would see a 3 in your sell-through. And everyone can go to the inventory dashboard, look at their inventory performance index, and look at sell-through, and you should have a number tied to that. So you would hope to see a higher number, maybe not so high because that means you're turning inventory so quickly that it may not be cost effective in terms of your shipping cost. But I would say shooting for between 1.5 and 2, or even 3. 3 is great, but not necessarily always possible because of you need to hold at least 30 days worth of inventory to ensure that you have a proper dispersal of inventory throughout the country. So you would have, in order to get a monthly turnover, this would be one of the scenarios. And then if you had a quarterly turnover, you would have basically the same amount of inventory that you sold was the same amount that you held on average. And that's kind of how that math works out.
Yeah, great. Now that's very, very clear. Thank you for doing that.
Excellent. Yep.
Before any final thoughts on? I know we only have time to cover some of these topics, for a small amount of time. Final thoughts on the restock limits before we tackle some of the other challenges that are before us.
I think I'm not sure. Let me see what we're tackling. I'd want to bring up in terms of restock limits, there is a hack. Just like last year, we had the hack of, if you had your Shopify, then you would increase your restock limits. There is a way to circumvent restock limits. You can actually get restock limits waived for some of your inventory. And that is the reason that I think that restock limits came back. And it's a program that Amazon launched the same week they launched the return of restock limits. They launched something called Amazon Warehousing and Distribution. That is basically Amazon saying that they want to become your 3PL. Send stuff into Amazon, pay them like you would a 3PL for storage and that type of thing. And they will keep track of what needs to be sent in. They will send inventory in and they will keep you in stock, and you can send however much inventory you want to them because you'll be paying them fees on that. And that inventory that you send to them is not subject to restock limits. Anything at your own 3PL, which I do advise not to use Amazon as your only third-party logistics if you are using the AWS or AWD program, because it is a new program and it's untried. You don't want to put all your eggs in that basket necessarily.
And just
Yeah,
to
so that's
on that
a
program,
hack for limits.
yeah, no, that is a great one. Basically, allow Amazon to take a greater share of your logistics wallet, and
Mm-hmm.
you'll get greater limits or no limits, or at least for now,
Yeah.
by the sounds of
Yeah.
it. Who know what that will look like next year, right? At the end of the day,
Exactly.
warehouse space is finite, so there's always some constraints at some point. Just
Yes.
this program you just mentioned before, is that an invite-only program, or is that open to the broader seller community?
Right. Right now, it has been invite only. It may be possible to reach out and find out if you can get an invite. I've suggested to some people, because we sometimes set up to archive certain emails from Amazon, ignore them, or they get filtered in some way because there's so many emails. We have stuff set up in our Gmail accounts or whatever it is. Search invite or search Amazon warehousing and distribution. Search these types of keywords in your emails, and you may have already been invited.
It might be an invite buried deeply there in your inbox. Well, this was a great segue to talk about our next topic, which is all about logistics flexibility. This year, what is on your list of things that sellers should think about when it comes to being flexible around how they run and operate their logistics?
So logistics flexibility is something that I started talking about, I guess, last year. And it's something that I found, here we go, sorry, just trying to get the right slides going. I basically, when I started talking about this, I had someone who said that they used the system and they hadn't stocked out since. And we've moved from, prior to 2020, we were basically using what was called just in time inventory, sending things in just when you need to. Nowadays, we have to use what's called just in case inventory. So there's been more of a doubling up of extra inventory that you keep in various different places just in case you can't rely on Amazon to check your stuff in, or, something gets stuck at the port. So there is a golden rule to adopt, which is never let anyone have all your stuff, otherwise known as don't put all your eggs in one basket. And the system would have to include, how do we buy in for more inventory and at the same time make sure our cash flow doesn't go crazy. So you would, if you're sending, let's say, a whole container, okay, I'm going to send a full container. That's putting all your eggs in one basket. You're putting everything on a boat and hoping, crossing your fingers that it's going to be checked in on time. And then, of course, when it gets stuck at port, you're kicking yourself. So, at this point, what do you do about that? Instead of ordering a container load, be ordering a container plus, say, a month or two of inventory, additional inventory. To control the cash flow, you want to negotiate with your supplier to hold the excess inventory for free, which they'll often do for, say, 3 months or so. So you're not paying for storage on that. So that helps your cash flow. And then you can also usually talk them into, okay, let's pay the initial payment, full payment, but then I'm only paying the final payment on what ships. And if you still have my excess inventory, I haven't paid you yet for that. I've only paid you for the container that shipped for that final payment. Then if you have an emergency, you have that inventory, you can airship it, but only if you need to. You don't want to airship it unless you absolutely need to incur the cost and it's going to be more costly to run out. So that would be kind of how you would set up logistics flexibility. It gives you the option to make a different move rather than locking you into, to being stuck at the behest of someone else, messing up or whatever.
Yeah. Are you starting to see a move into more inventory being held onshore? And what I mean by that is not yet in Amazon FBA, but in third-party warehouses, just to create that buffer. And just in case inventory sounds very expensive from a working capital point of view. But I think we've all realized that is unfortunately the option. But what do you see in North America here, or even Europe?
Yeah. There's definitely been an increase. There are people who never had a 3PL in their life, and then 2020 came around and they had to because of restock limits. So because of restock limits, most people are forced to have a 3PL, to have an additional fulfilled by merchant option as well, separate from a 3PL that does your replenishment, just sends cartons or pallets into Amazon FBA. Also, the trend has been to have an additional option to fulfill your orders. If Amazon doesn't check your stuff in, you still want to be able to take sales on Amazon and not rely on Amazon as the only way to distribute those products to your customers. So those are two things that we have seen crop up and become more popular in the past couple of years. And it's mostly because you can't trust the supply chain and Amazon's restock limits.
Yeah, no, that's unfortunate, but very true. So stocks in the country, we've got options in terms of bringing it there. We've got flexibility. Getting it into Amazon is the next question, right? Particularly around, how do we, you mentioned it in your intro, how can we speed things up? There's nothing more frustrating than sending a whole container or a whole big shipment into Amazon only for it to be checked in the Tuesday after Cyber Weekend, right?
Yes.
What can we do to avoid situations like that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The first thing that I'll say is talk to the owners of your 3PL, your freight forwarders, the people who are actually shipping your stuff in. A lot of time what we tend to do is we'll go onto Amazon, we'll set up our shipment, we'll get the shipment paid for, we'll send it over to our 3PL and we'll say, hey, can you ship this out? Here's everything you need to do that. And of course they're going to do it. They're busy and they don't take the time to pick up the phone and tell everyone, here's a better way to ship your stuff. To understand why it could take your stuff gets delivered and then 4 weeks later it gets checked in. To understand why that could happen, you need to understand that Amazon controls a lot of the trailers that are actually picking this stuff up. And if they don't control the trailers, they own a lot of the trailers. So if they don't own the trailer, they own contracts and relationships with a lot of carriers. And they say, if you want to send stuff in, you have to drop it off and we'll check it in when we have time. You drop the trailer, you usually pick up a new trailer and leave. That's kind of the system they set up. But things start getting backlogged, especially because they had so much turnover last year. That's what has been happening is, things get backlogged and they don't get checked in right away. What you want to do, it's going to be more expensive. It's going to tend to be more expensive. But if you've been having these problems, you'll want to pay the extra money for something called live unload. And that is usually a company that has not bought into, agreeing with Amazon. They don't have it's not an Amazon trailer. They don't have a contract that says drop your trailer. When you get the delivery date, that's give or take a couple of days. That's the check-in date. The stuff gets unloaded directly into the warehouse. It doesn't get, left in, to die in some parking lot somewhere. So ask your 3PL who's the best, that you use for live unload. I want a live unload, or can you get me a pricing on a live unload? And that would be kind of the question to ask. There are different companies that do it, but one of them that was recommended by the owner of HubDub, Eddie, he recommended something called Uber Freight for live unload.
So in other words, there's a decision to make. There's 3PLs that you can get your stock to Amazon's parking lot. I'm just got visions of trailers just sitting outside the massive distribution center waiting, quietly waiting for Amazon to get around. And then there's live unload, which means you are allocated a specific pick slot to deliver your goods, and you'll be checked in at that time.
Yes, exactly. And often, Amazon might favor, in terms of delivery dates, they might favor their trailers. So you might get a later delivery date, but if what you really care about is what I call net check-in time. If your delivery date is later, but your check-in time is earlier, that's what you really care about. You care about when it's checked in, even if you're getting it in the parking lot, later.
And in terms of the actual receipting process by Amazon, certainly, I mean, we've been doing a lot of work on the Amazon vendor side, and this is such a big topic, right? Sending 100 units, Amazon only receipts 98, 2 go missing, all of that. Now, of course, there's a cost of those missing things and chargebacks and all of that, but in peak trading, there's the opportunity cost of not having the stock to sell, right? Even if it's a small percentage. What do the best sellers do in terms of this? How do they make sure that the receipt rate of Amazon is as close as possible to 100%?
I mean, that's a tough one. I don't know if anyone has kind of really dialed that in, because there's a lot of human error involved. I would say, just not committing errors on your end to begin with. Making sure that each of those shipments were delivered. And sometimes you need to look at, if let's say you're doing loose cartons, you're shipping in cartons rather than pallets, making sure that you see the tracking numbers and that it's actually moving and tracking, because it's possible that at your warehouse you left something off. And we've had this happen ourselves with, loose cartons. It can also happen with a pallet. If a pallet doesn't make it onto the trailer, those are errors on your end that you can control. And then just being accurate with, from the inspection point at the order side or the supplier side to the 3PL, making sure that you have your stuff, your ducks in a row. And then, that helps to mitigate some of those issues. And then, of course, hoping that Amazon's warehousing staff is competent.
Yeah. It sounds like, reading between the lines, a lot of this comes down to the relationship with your 3PL and how they're performing for you, and make sure they're really on the ball and they're not dropping things or delaying things or, not delivering full loads. It sounds like a great relationship there is super crucial.
I think so. I mean, I look smarter than I am because I talk to these types of people, 3PLs, freight forwarders. They have the most up-to-date information. They are very smart, and a lot of them are happy to talk with you. I find it very interesting. Most people find it very boring. I find it very interesting, especially because it can, keep a lot of money in your pocket.
Yeah, for sure. We're getting close to the half an hour mark, but there's another quite a big topic actually I at least want to touch on, which is the interplay of marketing strategies and sort of driving that above the line activity versus staying in stock, and that whole balancing act to avoiding stockouts. And really, 2 questions for me. Actually, it might just be good to remind our audience, what is the price of going out of stock? Because I think there's a couple of different lenses to that. And then how do you think about marketing strategies alongside out of stock, right? On one level, we say, well, if we don't sell anything, we'll have a great in-stock position. It's clearly not the answer. Where's that balance?
Yeah. So in terms of, some of the prices of going out of stock, obviously now we have restock limits to think with. And if we've stocked out, then that's going to decrease our restock limits. Amazon only cares about what you've sold. They don't care about what you could have sold. So that side of things. And then financially, there are a lot of different costs involved. Obviously, running out of stock and not being able to sell, coming back in stock, and having to pay to re-rank is another one. But the costs that people don't consider are the costs beforehand. So if you've marketed yourself into a stock out, I know that prior to restock limits coming about, the number one reason that people stocked out was because they marketed themselves into a stock out. Another one is they put all their eggs in one basket. Those are the two main issues. They gave all their stuff to someone, Amazon, or put it on a boat or whatever, ran out of stock. Or they went to an event, they discovered a really cool hack for boosting their conversion rate or whatever it is, and they couldn't sustain. So those are some of the main costs of stocking out that I would say. And that was how I came up with inventory minded marketing, as I call it, specifically because nobody wanted to talk about inventory, but everyone wanted to talk about marketing. So I decided that if I, invented a term and said inventory minded marketing, would connect the dots between those two things and show how inventory and marketing are directly correlated. And if you get good at connecting those two and coordinating them, you can actually increase your revenue, but also your profitability.
That's brilliant. How to make inventory sexy as a topic, right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's okay. So how are you thinking about that? What will be your top three things for sellers to think about here?
Sure. First off is the marketing team needs to get their marketing plan to the inventory team. What sales are you planning on doing? What are you planning on? What do you think is going to happen seasonally? What is, do you have any lightning deals planned? All of those things you should be sending. PPC, I think I'm going to increase sales by, 10% because I'm doing this PPC campaign, or what if I increased my conversion rate by 3% with a tweak to my bullet points? Whatever it is, that needs to go to the inventory team, and the inventory team vets that against your SKUs and can give you the go ahead and say, okay, this is all great. This one SKU is going to stock out if you do that lightning deal. So you need to hold off on that lightning deal until we get back in stock on this date or whatever it is. So that would be first and foremost. And then beyond that, the inventory team is not off the hook. It took me about a year to realize that marketing wasn't the only one to blame, that inventory had been this passive role, and they really need to give data to the marketing team, right? They need to proactively say, hey, here are the products that at this pace you're going to stock out risk report. What are you going to stock out of? The marketing team can adjust their plan accordingly. And then what are we have in terms of slow sellers? I would say that's a range of, let's say for a business, 5 to 20 units a day. In my business, I consider that a slow seller versus a liquidation product, which is below 5 units a day. I'm not going to save this product at all. Get rid of it, get it off of my books, get it off of my catalog. Slow seller, I could possibly save. If I don't save this product, if I don't move it at the top of the list, it's going to fall off the bottom of the list, and it's going to completely, destroy my profitability. So those two reports. And then finally, the overstock report, which could be your best sellers, could be your slow sellers. But what am I carrying, let's say, more than 90 days of inventory? That can be used to either sell through it and boost your restock limits. You can also recover that cash, put it to some better use, and use it for ranking. If you want to rank for another keyword, you've got a bestseller that you have 120 days of inventory. Let's blast some of that inventory and rank for a keyword that we're, at the bottom of page 1. Let's get it to the top of page 1. So these reports become very valuable to marketing if they actually choose to use them and know how to use them to improve their marketing plan.
Sounds it's the typical kind of question, right? Which is communicate, share information. What do you see? What do I see? Let's build a plan around that. In terms of, and maybe we're sort of off-piste a little bit here, but what does it look like in terms of like weekly interaction between the inventory team or the supply chain team and the marketing team? of course, there's different models, but if there's a brand that's listening to this podcast and go, right, where do I start? What would be a good place to facilitate that interaction?
Sure. I think it starts with I think the easiest one is the marketing team giving a plan to the inventory team, because that seems to be more that those systems are more set up. But then, so you would say, okay, here's some of the steps. These are the plans that we have for these SKUs. List out the SKUs, list out the plans that you have. And we actually have a free template for this. If you went to sostocked.com/tools, we have an inventory-minded marketing planner that you can use to send this to your inventory team. And then as far as the inventory reports, those should be, I guess, created in an Excel spreadsheet. We have the ability to build those inside of Stockouts, but could also potentially create those inside of a spreadsheet. It would take a couple of exporting of reports and filtering and analyzing, but those could be created. It would be based on like slow sellers would be based on, okay, here's my range, 5 to 20 units a day. These products fall within that range. These are the products that I have too much overstock on, that type of thing. But generating those reports, and on a weekly basis, the inventory team, in a perfect world, the inventory team would supply those 4 reports to the marketing team. The marketing team would have their plan, but then take the reports and say, okay, well, we didn't realize that this SKU is actually about to stock out. Let's back off of that. This SKU is slow seller. We need to boost that. We're going to do a campaign. So let's put into the marketing report that we're about to send to inventory an increase in 10% because we're running a special PPC campaign or something. Oh, you're muted.
That makes sense. I think that's a great call to arms for kind of 2 different departments who I think traditionally have always been on different floors, probably on different Zoom calls these days, to really collaborate for the sake of really balancing, maximizing sales, staying in stock, and actually, using some of the different parts of your inventory, particularly the liquidated stock or overstock, so actually to use those to your strategic advantage, maybe drive your ranking, sell through, whatever that might be. So very insightful. Thank you so much, Kelsey. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I'm actually passionate about this topic as well, although I don't think anyone could be as passionate as you are. But there's a lot of nuts and bolts here that make really practical difference. So I really want to thank you, Chelsea, for coming on the show today. I really appreciate the expertise, the generosity that you brought to the table. I've written down at least 6 things that I think are just practical nuggets, like multi-channel fulfillment, using some of the new programs with Amazon, working in a new way with your 3PL, and collaborating better internally as an organization, which I think are going to really make a big difference. So thank you for providing those. I always ask at the end of the show, if there are viewers that are interested in getting in contact with you or exploring Stockouts, perhaps, what's the best way to do that for them?
Yeah, they go to sostock.com/connect. There's a lot of our, socials there, demo account or demo of the software, as well as free tools and just various different things that would be helpful.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kelsey. Till next time. And that's it for today's episode of Marketplace Masters. Thank you so much for watching or listening if you are listening to this as a podcast. Don't forget to visit Merchant Spring to access exclusive offers only available to viewers of this show. Till next time.